And a very pleasant good evening or good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to season 2, episode 8 of the QCast. And this has been a long time coming. I'm really pleased, honored, excited to have the head men's basketball coach of the Washington University Bears, Pat Juckem. And Pat, I saw on Twitter that you had a little family dinner going and a grill out. And, you know, a few years ago, I think is the first time we connected on Twitter, that I think we both have the Weber Genesis. And how did it treat you this evening, I might add?
You know, the channel, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate this and love what you do and what you mean to D3 hoops in our community. Yeah, so as I posted that picture, and I grilled in the dark, and you know, so that's an obstacle. And I will say this: I undercooked my salmon just a little bit. So I'm a little disappointed in myself. My effort tonight wasn't my best game, but you know, the family got fed, so that's a win.
Did you have the salmon on a plank? I have to add, how did we do it?
I do it on a. I have an apparatus. So you can do vegetables on it. I do
Beautiful.
On it. It works well. Got the skin on the bottom. Don't have to flip it at all. Can put the rubs on top. I don't get real sophisticated. I probably need to develop and enhance my game. But I have what I need.
And you're a busy guy. I also have to say your background is incredibly cool. And we're going to get into this a little later in the conversation about kind of the Illinois Wesleyan WashU non-conference rivalry, which is fantastic. But I'm just looking at that screen and I'm seeing like Alan Abuna's 3 from over there on your left shoulder, you know, that left wing. I'm seeing some big shots from Sean Johnson of the Titans over on the other end. Incredible history in that gymnasium, WashU Fieldhouse. We'll talk about that. But really, Pat, I wanted to start with the fact that you guys were one of many schools that didn't play last year. And let me just first ask you, I mean, what was that like as a head basketball coach of a program that really wasn't able to compete last year? Let's just start there, because I imagine that was really difficult.
No doubt, absolutely was. You know, and you know, I've been asked this a lot, you know, like how did you handle it, you know, and all those things. And I think where I always go is I just felt it was just so hard on our play. I felt so bad for our athletes and all the athletes that weren't able to compete, you know, fall, winter athletes. I think about, you know, really, I had 2 seniors on my team last year, Jack Nolan and Hayden Webb. And obviously Jack is back this year as a grad student, but Hayden graduated. And in fact, he just was with us this past weekend down in Memphis. He came and visited us. He's in pharmacy school in Arkansas. And I guess that's the part that's still the hardest is, you know, there was a young man who bided his time and,
right,
you know, had a kind of a breakthrough year as a junior, and really, I think was going to have an outstanding senior year and just didn't get that opportunity. And again, that story is across the board. It's not unique to us. It's everybody. So I think that's really that's always the part that gets me, you know, like the men and women that just, you know, missed out. We know it's finite. You only get, you know, so many opportunities. And so that was the hard part. But, you know, I think now that we're back in, boy, it's made you appreciate, I mean, we appreciate so many more things, right? But specific to, you know, basketball and coaching, you know, our first practice, right? I mean, just October 15th,
right.
Met. And first game, I'll tell you a story. This is a classic. So we play our first game. We played Milliken.
The Big Blue.
And the Big Blue. And, you know, Jack Nolan pulls a shot out and, you know, we escape. Milliken's a lot better this year, by the way.
Yes, they are.
They're all aware of that. Kramer's doing an awesome job. We're in my office after the game, and I pull up my suit pant, and I look, and I forgot to pack my socks. So I coached the game in like my, you know, athletic socks. My assistant Kevin Dux, you know, we're both kind of exasperated because we didn't play very well, and we're just like, what just happened? He pulls up his pant. And he did the same thing. So neither one of us brought, you know, socks, appropriate socks for the outfit. So, you know, just had to relearn a lot of stuff along the way.
And I think that's a really interesting place to start, because I've watched parts of every one of your games so far this season. I think the only one I missed the second Webster game. I don't think I watched that one, but what I wanted to talk through with you, it seems like that the teams that didn't play last year, now maybe it applies to some, not others, but every season there is a learning curve where game 1 looks a certain way and game 20 looks a certain way. But what is your take, Pat, around the teams that didn't play last year? Because as I've watched you, you look like a completely different basketball team from the team that played those first 2 games, the game you lost at Webster, the Milliken game that you won, to like you guys just rolling the Rhodes tournament. You looked incredible. I thought you looked just ridiculous against Hendricks Friday, I think that was. Talk to me about like the gap there of not playing last year and what that did to you entering this year.
I can't speak to anybody else other than our own experience, but I look at when we came in, I just didn't know a lot about our team. Like I just didn't know, usually you start a year and you've got that feedback of that previous season. And even though you've got, players graduate, you have got some constants, right? And it had been so long since we had played a game, and, with essentially 2 classes of players who've never, freshmen and basically the 2 freshman classes, we took things very, I'd say deliberately and slowly in terms of, it was almost like my first year here when you're coming in with all new players, new to you, you new to them, every language is different. And it's slow. And because you got to get some basic foundational things down. And that's really kind of where we were, even though we have, a handful of seniors who certainly understand, but those guys didn't play any basketball.
Right.
And one of the interesting things is our freshmen that did play a full season last year, I do think you can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Just with instinct, just like they just played a lot. And it's taken our guys, our older guys some time, and then to mesh all that together. We've gotten so much feedback, I think, from those early games, and it really, we were a hard watch. I'll be the first to admit, that's pretty rough, particularly on the defensively, we weren't too bad. Offensively, we were rough. And, but one thing our guys do a great job, is we try to just come up with a couple themes from the films, right? Like, all right, here's 2 things. Like, let's focus on this and this, and can we apply that in these next couple practices, and let's see if we can get better at that, and not try to correct the whole thing at once. And then I always look at it like, and this is just me, I guess, how I approach the game. Like, I don't really know. I want to have room to evolve. Like, I think our teams evolve, and we play with a lot of freedom offensively, and that's by choice. And I think they kind of I need to see us play together for a while to kind of figure out what we're good at. And then we can start to make some, adjustments or emphasis or stress this or that. And so all those things have occurred. And then I think finally our guys are super competitive and prideful, and they're like,
right.
we don't like how we look. And so they really, I think the buy-in, so all those things, and we've played better. We still have a long ways to go for sure. But it's been, I think our guys have gained a little confidence, typical, I don't think they thought we were we didn't look like we were very good. We didn't look like we knew how to play basketball at times. And they started to question, shoot, are we any good? And, I think we can be all right. I think we could be pretty good. And now hopefully, some of this kind of reinforces it, gets a little bit of momentum going towards that.
And at the Division III level, Pat, it's interesting that there's not a lot of forgiveness for a loss at any time. It's not like Division I where they look at, how'd you do in your last 10 games or something. If you lose that game to Webster, which you did, and then you go to that tournament you played at Rhodes, and I believe it was 16 versus 18 at the time of the game when you're playing a really good Dubuque team. If you drop that one, or if you come home and you drop the Hendricks game or the St. Thomas game, you start to put yourself in a really tough position early with some very tough games coming up, including the UAA games. So I would think that coaches like yourself are in a pretty tough position. You didn't play last year. You're trying to figure out, and oh, by the way, the clock is ticking on your resume. How does that factor into any of this, or does it not factor in?
I mean, certainly you're right on. You're right. We know it's there, but I don't think it's very healthy for us to obsess about that. Right. It doesn't. So everything, we're doing is just focused on kind of the growth mindset and just how can we improve today? And, when it's all done in end of February, we'll count them up and we'll see if we've done enough or if we've earned a bid. But I think our guys are aware, and especially our older guys are very aware. I think the last thing they need to be putting or like feeling pressure from me, the coach. So we just try to focus on, what is our identity? And when we last played back in March of 20, we had arrived at a point where we really, we were playing very well and we really had a strong identity. I think we really knew who we were. And then, that changes, right? You have new, that classes, those seniors were gone. And can we reestablish that identity? Just because I want it to be our identity doesn't mean that necessarily it will be. And, one of the things about not playing last year is us coaches who weren't playing, we're watching a ton of basketball. We're attending virtual clinics. Right. I've got probably 8 notebooks filled of, this and that. And I think sometimes you overthink it too. Right. And I think I was a little bit so anyway, we've gotten back to, I think, our core identity is of how we're playing, or at least defensively, we're playing that way.
You mentioned that team from 1920 that was in the Sweet 16 when COVID hit and the world shut down. And I've talked to many guests on this show about, I can still see the bracket, and it was an amazing Sweet 16 bracket. Elmhurst is hosting Pomona Pitzer, and there were people excited about Yeshiva and Randolph-Macon. And I mean, WashU and North Central, that was going to be an incredible game in Naperville. I assume you guys were in Naperville at the time that you got word. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were in the middle of our practice.
That's right.
Central, and Mike Schauer was our NCAA rep. So he's there, and we could see what was coming. Our goal, quite honestly, Bob, was I was hoping, obviously we're hoping to maybe get the game in, but then it became can we just get one more practice in? I guess I'm like a coach, let's not have our season end and a bus ride to Naperville in the hotel room. We got to the floor, we got into our practice. And then once we got going, you forget about everything, right? We were going and we were having a really good practice. And I'll never forget this. I glanced over, we're in the middle of a intense drill, and I see, Mike on his phone. And then I saw some of my seniors on the baseline, and I saw their facial expressions. I think when Mike was starting to do this, and I watched, 5 seniors' careers end there. And so at least he let us finish the drill, because it was really good. Guys were competing. And then he's like, Pat, sorry, I gotta inform you. And that's, we all know what's going on since then. In some ways there was some beauty in it that, I mean, there was very emotional. We hug, we come to our senses. Then we went back to the hotel, showered, and we went to a nice restaurant on the NCAA's dime and had a hell of a dinner.
And talk about, you guys were at the top of your games respectively. North Central had just knocked off Oshkosh on a ridiculously cool buzzer beater type play. And I think that was the year you guys beat the daylights out of Nebraska Wesleyan, right? You guys were in Lincoln at Nebraska Wesleyan to beat them, right?
Yep.
So the matchup there was incredible. And you're right, heartbreaking for so many seniors. And it's an interesting story to hear everyone's take on where they were at that moment. Even as a fan, I'll never forget where I was and finding out that it was over. And you could see it coming. It was snowballing. That day, the Big Ten canceled their tournament or something happened. And we're lucky we're in a much better place now. Let's talk a little bit about this team. You're sitting here 6-1. So you survived the opener against Milliken. I'm going to ask you about the gentleman that made that shot. You lose a game to Webster where I watched it. It was a game where just you didn't play well. You didn't play well, and it felt to me watching a stream that you're in that little small tough Webster gym, and it's hostile and intense, and they played with a lot of confidence, and the more they played well, the more confident they were. You lost that game. You come back, you beat Blackburn. I think that game was in Carlinville at the Beaver Dome, which is not an easy place to try to get things right. That is you talk about a little place. You beat Webster, then you come back and beat them handily, probably just a week or so after you lost to them. Then kind of the game where everyone felt like, okay, they're figuring it out. You beat a really good Dubuque team. The next night you beat Rhodes on their floor. The Hendricks game this past Friday, I saw Hendricks in person here in Dallas at University of Dallas. And that's a good basketball team that you completely dominated and completely shut down an All-American caliber player. And then you beat St. Thomas in the championship of the Lapata. So you're sitting 6-1, all things considered, Pat. Got to be feeling pretty good considering, how the second game played out there. I mean, 6-1, feeling good right now.
I don't obsess about the record. I do. What I like is, I feel like I mentioned earlier, like we've reestablished who we are and who we're trying to become. And we're seeing the things that we're emphasizing in film and in practice starting to come to fruition in the games. And it builds momentum, like as guys, hey, this is what we've been emphasizing and I'm doing it and it's working well. The buy-in increases with that. So, I mean, this game is very humbling. And so, I mean, as much as you'd love to, replay or redo that first Webster, I really believe that's how it had to play out. Like,
right.
We had to really, it was a look in the mirror, and not just for our, as much for myself and my staff, like, hey, we're not right. And so but our guys really have responded terrifically from that. And I'm excited, we're just excited. It's amazing. We're 8 games in, we're 7-1. We're almost a third of the way through our season. It's pretty crazy once it gets going, like how the momentum of a season goes. And, I'm like any other coach, like you're just, what are we doing tomorrow? Like, how are we going to get better in Monday? We've got a game on Wednesday versus a rival, kind of, our
Fontbonne,
one block away from us.
Yep.
And then we've got one of the best team in the country, or maybe one of the best in Illinois Wesleyan staring at us, in 10 days or whatever. So we just got to get better, but I really like our guys. We've got a neat group, fun personalities, a little bit of everything. They make it a lot of fun to coach, that's for sure.
And let's talk about a few of those guys in particular. And let's start in the obvious place here. Jack Nolan, I remember when he was a senior in high school, and every year when you follow the Illinois, the Chicago recruiting scene, there's usually a guy that is the small college guy, the guy everyone wants. Every D3 wants the guy. Most of the D2s want the guys, and some Division Ones are sniffing around. In that year, 5 years ago, was Jack Nolan from Bennett. And boy, has he not disappointed. He starts the year off, he hits that buzzer beater against Milliken to win the game. He's had some incredible games since then for you in your 7-1 start here. I mean, just talk a little bit about your stud guard, Jack Nolan.
Well, I'm going to start here. So when I got the job, and the first time I met Jack, and I remember I came down, I gave him a hard time because I tried to at least reach out to him when I was at Oshkosh. He was in my phone, and I still had like the text message I sent him. He never returned my text. So I said, well, now you're forced to deal with me because I'm your coach. But I mean, what do I say about this young? he is, he marches to his own drumbeat. Like he's got his way, and it's been really cool over the last couple of years to really, develop a relationship, right? Because when you don't recruit someone, like
you start from behind. Yeah.
you didn't pick me, I said, you didn't pick me, I picked you. But we've developed a really close, relationship where we can, speak truth to one another. And man, when you get off the bus with guys like that, and I've been fortunate to have some really good guys in my stops, right? And, they always said those guys make you look smarter as a coach. They really do. Like, sometimes the best thing I need to do is just get out of the way and sit down and close my mouth and just let him do his thing.
Where does he rank, Pat, in terms of just pure shooters that you have coached? And when I watch him, to me, the test of pure shooter isn't the guy that knocks down wide open threes. There's a lot of those in Division III, but like, he is so quick to get to a pull up mid range and touch no rim. To me, like mid-range jump shooting is the sign. And he is such a pure mid-range shooter. Of course, he's a great 3-point shooter. Where does he stack up for you? I know you had Ben Boots and you had is he the best you've coached, or where does he rank there in terms of pure shooter?
In terms of, and you're right on, like, he's a tough shot maker, and that's because when you play the really good teams, I said the best teams on our schedule, and we're fortunate to have a lot of those types of teams. Like, you need a guy or two guys that can make the tough shots, because they're not going to break down. They're going to be sound in their approach. And he is really good. And here's the thing. I mean, he's maniacal in terms, like his shooting regimen. He now trusts me. It took him a couple of years, but now he lets me rebound for him. And his shooting regimen, it is detailed, it's specific. He works those shots you see him shoot. He works on those shots.
Yeah, those aren't accidents, are they?
They're not. No, he works. So at times, somebody like, dang, that's a tough shot. Like, how do you, I'm like, but he practices that, like he works on that shot, and he's getting the best defender every night, and usually a second defender.
Sure.
And so he knows how to, the shots he needs, how to prepare. He does it with, just incredible consistency, and he works, he's probably in our gym right now at some goofy hour, because that's just what that's what he does. That's what he loves to do.
Yeah. If you watch him shoot like a 17-foot baseline jump shot, just pure. And that he's just an amazing shooter. He's an amazing player. I mean, he handles the ball really well. He's tough. And he almost wasn't on this roster. So I was going to ask you a little bit of, when the COVID season hit, he's in the transfer portal, and I'm sure he had a bunch of really good opportunities. I don't know how that all played out, but at some point, what was the moment like that when you learned that he was going to come back to WashU for his 5th year? That must have been a pretty great day for Coach Juckem.
It was a great day. I was at Six Flags Great America that day with my son, and about to get onto some roller coaster. And I saw he texted me like, I think this was in June, sometime in June. Coach, can we talk? So I call him right there. I told my son, like, wait, hold my spot in the line. I got to talk.
The American Eagle can wait. Like, whatever's going on in Gurnee is not that big a deal.
It's either going to be a really good ride or a really bad ride. And I could tell, like, right away when the first thing I could tell right away in his voice that, he's coming back. I just could sense it. And the great thing, Bob, is you're right. He had a lot of good opportunities. But he was really excited. Like, he was really excited to say, Coach, I'm going to finish it out. Like, I'm coming back. It works for me. It works not just basketball wise. It also works academically for where I'm going with things. But just like, he chose it. Like, it wasn't like he didn't have options. And I think that's what felt best, because all along, and we had a really open, really going back to the prior, the year before, June, July, we all could foresee what was potentially going to come. Right. And so we just said that I'm going to support you, whatever I can do. Let me help you. I talked to Division I coaches on his behalf. A lot reached out. I just said, Jack, you've done so much for us, for this program. You do what's best for you, and if it's back here at WashU, we're that related, but I'm going to, I'm part of your family no matter what, and I'm going to support you. And so it's obviously, from a pure coach perspective, yeah, it's the outcome that we were hoping for, but best part is it's really what he wanted. And that's what, I think it's great about it. And so we're enjoying everything, and he's doing, he's got a different, he still has to carry the load in terms of, our scoring, but it's really allowed him to work on, being a leader. And,
right.
He's a full 4 years older than those freshmen. And that's 18 to 23, right?
That's a big difference.
And he's had to and he's had to, really understand and make that, okay, these guys have no idea how to run motion offense or how to play with me. And he's doing a great job of developing trust and bringing those guys along. Cause he knows he needs them. We need those young guys to figure some things out and to play an important role with us. And so it's been really cool to see him have to take on, a very different role within our program beyond what, he's known for.
And that even comes across watching, the game on stream. It's amazing the things you could pick up. It's obvious that he's out there mentoring your young guys, and you have a really good group of young guys. One of those, not fair to call anyone the next Jack Nolan, but a guy that has a chance to be one of the next great WashU players is Hayden Doyle, stud freshman from Wisconsin. I remember when he committed, you never know what to make of these huddle videos and things, right? Because everyone shoots 100% in the huddle video, but you can look at skill set and you can say that kid's good. And I remember seeing that, thinking, and then a buddy of mine, John Murray, that really good friend of mine up in Wisconsin, he said, hey, WashU just got this guy and he's a stud. He's starting for you. He's playing really well. I know he's got to be benefiting from having Jack Nolan out there, but talk a little bit, if you would, about your freshman guard, Hayden Doyle.
Yeah, he's done a great job. It's tough to just be kind of thrown in, to the fire, so to speak. And but Hayden comes from a really good program, Brookfield East High School in Wisconsin, highly competitive, really well coached, and so that I think just gave him a great head start. And then he's extremely humble. I mean, he is a humble young man. He asked tons of questions. He asked tons of questions of the coaches, of Jack, of the fellow seniors. And so he's really done it the way that you need to do it as a young guy who's been thrust up, a pretty good a role opportunity right off the bat. And he's, he can score, but he's really doing a great job, just defending and rebounding the basketball. He's filling the stat sheet. He's assisted turnover is great. And he's a really super competitive kid. He really fits in well because he's just got he's got a passion and a competitive drive that the really good ones have. And so it's great that he's able to play with a guy like Jack and Justin and Charlie Jacob, David Windley. Those seniors have done a great job of really embracing not just Hayden, but our other freshmen. And I'm going to go on a tangent here for a second. That's something that I think I walked in and I inherited at WashU was this tradition, our culture, I guess is the overused word, of the mentorship of, upperclassmen mentoring the newcomers, right? And not just basketball court, but life adjustments. And I've never once in my time at WashU have had to talk to my seniors or my upperclassmen. They just have done it, and it's continued to perpetuate. And I'm going to hail my seniors. We've got 6 precocious freshmen who are trying to figure out college and basketball and everything in between. And those guys have just been, my seniors have been rock stars.
Yeah, that's the sign of a great program. You know, WashU's clearly been a top 10 program in Division III over the last 20 years, 30 years, whatever. And that's what happens at the best programs is you just have that natural kind of passing of the torch and mentorship. And no surprise to hear you mention that. I wanted to ask about two more guys here. You have a unique situation that I don't know if people are paying enough attention to, that for 40 minutes, you have a 6'10" guy on the floor, and not just the 6'10" guy that happens to end up in Division III because no one else wants him. I mean, you have two 6'10" guys who are really skilled guys, legit 6'10" basketball players. You've got Kevin, is it Davet? Is that how you pronounce it? Davet?
Yeah.
So Kevin Davet, 6'10" junior, and Jake Wolf. I don't know if he has scored a lot. I just know somewhere in that Dubuque game, Rhodes game, maybe both, I'm watching him post up, and he doesn't look like the baby giraffe freshman. Like, he's posting up, asking for the ball, and you think he missed a little half hook, but I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, that is going to be a problem. If you would talk about that two-headed monster you have at the 5.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. You know, it's interesting. The game seems to be getting smaller, you know,
Yeah, not many of those guys out there. You have 2 of them.
Yeah. And we've been fortunate, I think. And quite honestly, we have another talented big kid who's out with an ACL, Nate Bladorn, who
That's right.
So we've stayed big, and you're right, Kevin and Jake, you know, and Kevin played for us some as a freshman. And then, you know, Jake's in his freshman year. So again, to our earlier part of our conversation, didn't really know what we fully had with those guys until we've gotten going and the bullets have gotten real. And the confidence that, you know, Jake's confidence is growing daily. I think Kevin is realizing, like, you know, people can't really deal with me. Like, he's, you know, and the cool thing so Kevin Davet, he's from Cleveland. His mentor, I think 8th, 9th grade, his assistant coach in his program was Zydrunas Ilgauskas.
Nice.
You know, the Cav. And so, like, Kevin's got really good touch and footwork and post fundamentals. And he's worked with like an NBA I mean, like, he was taught by, you know, a really good NBA post player. And so he does some things that are still kind of, you know, like, wow, like I don't see many guys that can do that, you know, both hands, you know, the kind of
absolutely
dancing bear, you know, footwork. So we are, and I think our guys, I think our players, you know, a lot of our guys haven't played with like 6'10" player. Like that's an adjustment in its own right. Like, how do I play with a guy like that? You know, and so we're still, I think, learning that, how to take advantage of them. And, but they're humble, and they are excited for each other's success. And, you know, I think in our game yesterday, Kevin Davet got 2 early fouls. So you know, Jake had to play a much bigger, you know, played a longer stretches. And Kevin was fired up for him on the bench. And then second half, Kevin kind of got going a little bit more. And so that's what, again, you know, good guys, high character guys, they're just excited for each other. But it's fun to, you know, to have that. And the nice thing too, is they're both, you know, defensively, you know, they're pretty good. Like, they move their feet, they stay in. Yeah. You always think with guys like that, like, okay, how are they going to guard in ball screens? How are they going to guard the small 5s, the athletic 5s, right? And they're doing a great job, because we're playing a lot of those kind of guys, and they've done terrific. So really pleased with them.
And you're right. The game is changing at the Division III level, in that there's not a ton of teams that have a true 5 anymore. Illinois Wesleyan has a boatload of them, and you have great ones. It's interesting, though, more and more you get these matchups, especially in the non-conference, where your big post is guarding like a 6'4" wing, you know, having to chase them out around screens. And it creates interesting mismatches on both sides of the floor. Does that, I mean, that's something obviously you have to game plan for, right? Is how are your 6'10" bigs going to guard a 6'4" guy when that matchup happens? Do you just roll with that, or like that's a dynamic? I'm not wrong about that, correct? That's something you see all the time, right?
You're right. Absolutely. And I think it's even, you know, it's always the hardest probably positioned to recruit in the non-scholarship level is size, and then skilled size on top of that, right? So we're mindful because the game has become so, ball screen heavy and two-man game heavy, and there's a myriad of ways in which you can approach that. And then, sometimes as coaches, we overthink things. And then I have an assistant, a longtime veteran, like one of those guys you got to have in your staff that he's old and doesn't care what he says. And, his name's Steve. And he's like, well, she's Pat. They've got to guard our guy too. Don't forget. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
That's right. That's exactly right. Is that like that team that's got the 6'4" guy, it has to deal with your guys on the other end. And so I love the matchups and the way it plays out, because it's almost kind of refreshing, think of like Illinois Wesleyan playing WashU, and it's like, okay, Matt Laritz has a very comfortable matchup here. Both sides are going to be, on equal footing, right? Instead of like, who's Matt going to guard? So it's really cool to watch the dynamics of Division III rosters. One other player I want to ask you about, and we talked off the air about this one, and so we're just going to take this wherever you want to take this. I'll just tee this up to say that, I became aware a few months ago, can't remember when, off season, about some pretty serious personal issues going on with Justin Hardy, who is an all-American caliber 6'5" stud, combo forward, easily an all-American caliber guy. He's going through some really tough times right now. And I've never tweeted about it or mentioned it to anyone else because it's not my story to tell. I don't know if it's your story to tell, but certainly I wanted to ask you to share whatever you can share about Justin and how he's doing. And we'll certainly respect it if you can't say anything.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that. And again, first of all, Justin Hardy is amazing. Like, he is way more mature than the head coach. And he's my bellwether, my guy I go to. And when I've got like, I'm thinking about doing this, Justin, let me just bounce it off you. And he's usually right on the money. He has been going through some significant health things. I'm not going to get into detail.
Right.
Respect, Justin and his, what he's doing. All I can say is he is an inspiration. He is amazing. His impact on our team, on our program, on his teammates, on our community, our WashU community is I mean, it sends shivers down my spine, just literally like thinking about it. And, and I'll say this, he is yet to miss a practice this year. We've had 32 practices. He's not missed one. He's yet to miss a game. And he down the stretch yesterday. So last weekend, and he's again, I'm not going to go into details, but he goes for 31-11 against a really good Dubuque team, follows up the next day. I think he had 15, 7, and 7. While dealing with his other, health challenges. I think, as I told you earlier, I think they'll make a movie about him someday. Like, I think it's that powerful, and it's the power of the mind. And he's where he needs to be. He needs to be around his teammates here. He's graduating from WashU in 3.5 years. He's graduating this Friday. This coming Friday, he's going to graduate with with crazy high GPA from Nolan Business School at WashU. Wow. He's got a job lined up, where he interned at McKinsey last summer. I mean, what can I say? It just, I treasure every day that we get to coach guys like Justin. And
it was cool.
If he wants
after
to at some point tell his story in more detail, I'd be more than happy to go beyond that. But I'll just say it's unbelievable. And I mean, this young man is the epitome of what we're all supposed to be about.
After that Dubuque game, I was watching that game, and when the buzzer sounded, I tweeted, WashU Dubuque score, and Justin Hardy with 31-11 and 4 assists or whatever. And it was kind of cool. I started noticing people close to him starting to retweet it, saying things like Justin's my hero. And, again, at the time I knew enough to be dangerous that something was going on. I just thought it was cool that you could tell there was some emotion, a lot of emotion going on with that. Maybe we'll just wrap it up by saying that it's Justin's story to tell. And when he wants to, he'll tell that story. And maybe just in the meantime, for everyone that's watching Division III basketball games this year, the story will put perspective on a lot of things, that this is more than just about basketball. And, when you watch Justin Hardy this year, know that that young man is really, really impressive. Let's move on a little bit, Pat. I'd really like to talk about your Division III story. I always find it fascinating how everyone ended up in these places we are as fans or coaches. You grew up in Wisconsin, a small town outside Appleton, Shilton, Wisconsin, and you went to college at Lawrence to play basketball. And I'm just curious. So as a kid growing up in a small town near Appleton, is it fair to say, I always say this, that when people watch like UAA and CCIW games, they'll say, well, how do you guys get those guys? In our part of the country, that's a Division II player. Growing up in Wisconsin, you probably knew pretty darn well that Division III basketball was outstanding. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely. And I remember so I'm early 90s, and I again, small high school. I was a bigger fish at a small high school. I remember I sent my game film to some of the WIAC coaches, and and I already knew, like, there's no, like, I'd gone games at Oshkosh, Stevens Point, and I'm looking like, oh my God, like, I'm not anywhere near those guys, which was good, healthy to see. Right. And so I went where I could play.
Because that was literally when Bo Ryan had Platteville rolling. When you were in high school, Bo Ryan had probably already won one or two of those things, right? Like you
Absolutely.
had it. I mean,
I remember I went to a Platteville at Oshkosh game. And it was, I'd been to probably a Marquette game, a Wisconsin Green Bay game. I tell you, I thought the Platteville team and the Oshkosh, like, that was the best players I've ever seen in person. They were so, Bo's teams during that era were ridiculous, and so it did, and that's one of the things about being in Wisconsin. I think that does make it a little more unique. When people ask like about Division III, and I'm like, if you're in that state, and first of all, your coaches probably came from that league,
right,
have perspective how good Division III is, and someone who played at one of those schools, and like, that guy is unbelievably good. And it does, compared to like some other places I've been where they just don't have that perspective. The one thing in that state is you've seen how good a players are at, and we know, but
right,
for that high school coach or that family or that young man or young woman, whatever, there's examples of, like, you got to be really good to play those places.
And that's my favorite moments a lot of times, is when a young man that's a senior or a junior in high school, starting to get recruited at a pretty high level, the moment they go to that Division III game in the UAA, the CCIW, the IIAC, whatever great program they're going to, and the eye-opening moment, like, holy crap, I'm not as good as that guy. And it's a great dynamic. And so you go to Lawrence, play basketball. And what I wanted to ask you is, you started then a progression to where you're now the head coach. You have one of the best jobs in Division III, one of the best jobs in small college basketball at WashU, but you're the head boys basketball coach at a high school, right? For I think 3 seasons. And I want to talk about some of these stops. You're the assistant coach at Lawrence. You come back to your alma mater, head coach at head coach at Oshkosh, head coach at WashU. The question I want to ask before I get into some of those stops, there's a lot of people that will listen to this that want to be coaches. I was listening to an interview at halftime of the Illinois Wesleyan game. Their grad assistant was getting interviewed. He said, I hope I can find a way to be a coach. There's a million people that are going to listen to this, maybe 100 that want to understand how to be a coach. Are there some things you could tell people on what you did well, what you do differently? Like, how does a kid that wants to be a coach get there?
You know, I guess I'm now the age and have done this long enough that I have a lot of these conversations with, you know, the GAs or those young, you know, and especially over the pandemic, I was fortunate to have a lot of people reach out and had a lot of conversations with young people, which was really, you know, again, humbling to do. And, you know, the one thing I guess I always go back to is there's no one way, right? There's no, like, this is the way to do it. You know, I think, you know, your eyes are wide open. It is, and there's so many ways that you know, coaching doesn't have to be, you know, the college. Some of the best coaches, the best coaches I know are high school coaches by far.
Right.
I mean, you know, and I've sat in a zillion practices, Division I practices all the way high school. And I can tell you the best coaches I still are some of the high school coaches, you know. The weird thing I think with me is it wasn't my plan. It wasn't, you know, I guess I was listening to a podcast recently and I forget what coach it was. He's like, I knew when I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a coach. And I kind of fell into it. I got done playing at Lawrence. I had a psychology degree. I was like, do I really, you know, grad school, what do you do? And there you could get a teaching certification. Like I had to take a couple education classes and student teach that after I graduated. And so John Tharp, who's a huge mentor of mine, he was my coach my senior year. It's like, Pat, you're going to be in the area. Help me out, you know? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, I like what coach, you got great energy. I think you're going to get this thing going. I'd love to, you know, come by. And I started going to like our planning sessions for the season. And I think it's still true today. Like, I think players have no idea what coaches do, like what they do and how much time and like planning a practice takes as long as the practice itself.
Right.
I remember sitting in these meetings with John, and as Mike DeGeorge, who's now a successful coach, was his assistant. And I'm just like, oh my Lord, like, I can't believe the detail and the thought process and how you're, you know, and I got hooked. I just got hooked. Like, this is so, you know, because when you're done playing, you do have that void. I'm like, where am I going to fill it? And it's like, I found something that was actually better, you know, like this is more interesting. And so just that year was so, and because of just being a grad or whatever, I was a volunteer assistant. You know, I got a high school history, psychology teaching job, and they needed a varsity coach. And they're like, well, you played college basketball and you coached for a year. You know, I'm 22 or 23. I'm so ill prepared. But it was a great training ground, right? To go and be a high school coach and just figure things out. And I had a good mentor there. And then, you know, I did it for a couple of years. And I was, quite honestly, I thought, I wasn't aspiring to be a college coach. And then John Tharp calls me up. It's like, it was Labor Day weekend in 1999. And his assistant had just left. And I started teaching, school year had started. He goes, Pat, I need you to come back. I need you to be my assistant. And I'm like, boy, that sounds awesome. I don't know what my teaching job, I've already started the year. Can you do that? And, you know, I wasn't married. I was thinking I was single still. I'm like, what the heck, you know, I believe in John. I believe in what he's doing. And I did it. And it's just kind of like one thing led to another. And, you know, I've been very fortunate. I've been blessed beyond belief. And, you know, I've made a lot of mistakes and learned from them and surrounded myself with a lot of good people and have had really good players, which that helps a lot.
A couple themes that really track with what others have said here is having mentors is critical in trying to get into coaching, and being around good people, like people you mentioned, John Tharp, for one example, Mike DeGeorge, people that you trusted. And I think, even though you didn't say it direct, but taking chances, you know, there's it's probably not a profession that's for everybody, because you have to roll the dice on many occasions, and you've done it. You've done it throughout your career. You've got to kind of bet on yourself over and over again. And that's really interesting to hear you walk us through that. I want to talk just about a couple of these stops. Your assistant Lawrence had a huge hand in recruiting that 25-0 group of kids that was just unbelievable. And then you get the job at Co. And I think you were at Co for about 6 years. You know, we talked about the CCIW, the UAA, the WIAC, but what is now the ARC, that used to be the IIAC, that is a super underrated and tough league. Talk about coaching in the IIAC at Co.
Well, you're right. It is, and I didn't have a great awareness of it when I took the job at Co. Like how, I didn't really, how good Wartburg and that type. Right. BV was unbelievable.
They were nasty. Yeah.
Played them in the tournament in a great game when I was at Lawrence like 2 years earlier. And he was peeling off like 6'8", 6'8", 6'8". Like they were just one of the most impressive physical teams I've ever seen. So to your point, yeah, my 05, 06, I think was my first year at Co. God, there was outstanding players and teams. And I'm fortunate I had a pretty good team myself. And it makes you think like whatever league you're in is always the toughest league, right?
Right.
It's an amazing league because you're in it and you're trying to fight to survive or succeed or get to the top. But you're right. And I remember at the time, the knock on a little bit is no team in that league really had gone deep. I mean, there'd been teams very capable. BV,
yep.
Had a team that knocked off somebody, one of those years, but no one had really gone deep. And then unfortunately, I guess I was on the other side of it when Nebraska Wesleyan
right
national championship. But no, you're right. It is, and it continues. I mean, they're across the board. Hey, and this is what's changed about Division III basketball. And Bob, I know you know this. The bottom of Division III, whatever that is, has come up so significant.
Yeah, a crazy amount.
The bottom isn't, the gap continues to shrink.
Well, just think of it this way: the number one team in the country is from a league that it doesn't get a lot of attention. The Skyline. I mean, Yeshiva. Think about that. Think of all the teams that are good. That 30 years ago, I think you could have penciled in about 15 or 20 names and said that the Final Four is going to come from here. It's not like that anymore. There's so many good coaches. There's so much parity that it's quite amazing to watch how that's evolved over 20, 30 years. When you got the Oshkosh job, I think some people might think you just inherited the Oshkosh that they currently see, that's always in the rankings. You actually inherited an Oshkosh team that was a little down. Like, it was a very proud program, but they were 4-21 the year before. I think they were 500 a couple of years. So it was a very successful program that had been down. You didn't start from, like, you didn't inherit a team that won 22 games and you had all the juniors back, kind of thing. What was the building process like? I talked to Matt Lewis, who was by your side during this. What was it like building it up at Oshkosh to the point that you played in the national championship game?
Well, it was exhausting and awesome at the same time. And you mentioned Matt. I mean, and I'd be remiss if I didn't, he's a big part of, we built, together, and obviously really excited about how things have continued with him in charge. Now I've looked back at this. I've taken, between when I got to Co, they were solid, I get to WashU and, WashU. Oshkosh, and I knew, and that's partly why I was pretty excited about the opportunity, because, it was down and for a couple of years, but I had seen where it had been and
right.
Where it could get potentially if we, did it the right way. And we chose to, to do it, I think, in a pretty deliberate manner. Like, we didn't take a bunch of transfers. We year one, I got hired, I think it was July 2nd. So kind of had what we had. We had open tryouts. I mean, we could have probably, some intramural teams, some places probably would have knocked us off. It was like, just, can we win break this streak of losses in the league? And
right.
got, I think, 1 or 2 wins that first year in the league. All right, that's a start. Recruited our tails off, and I think we had 10 freshmen the next year. And so then you're starting, we got a couple returning guys, and then all these freshmen, right? No idea how to. And then that year in that league with all freshmen, which
tough recipe. In the recruiting success that, I mean, if you talk about that group that you had at the end, that is special talent. Ben Boots, Jack Flynn, is it Connor Duax, Brett Witchow, Charlie Noon, Adam Fravert. I mean, you and Matt and your staff landed some absolute studs, a few of which most people that went to Fort Wayne were like, how did these guys get to Division III? What was the key to that recruiting success? Like, did it take a while to figure it out? What finally clicked that allowed the dominoes to fall there?
Well, I think, part of it is, people had to view us as a competitive program again. And, so it takes a little while to gain that credibility back. When I got to Oshkosh, it was, I think Stevens Point and Whitewater were trading national championships,
right.
So out of our league, any really good player in that state was, you're immediately thinking of those, like, those are the places who are winning national championships. And so the beautiful part is, like, we had a measuring stick, like, right away, like, all right, here's the gap, how are we going to close the gap? And, we certainly obviously could sell the opportunity and then the vision. And I think something that we, and Matt was a huge part of this, what is our vision and how do we articulate that? And I think we really, doubled down on our style of play. And hey, you get a chance to build something, and put your mark on it. You could go to a place that's already built, or you could come here and then build it where it hasn't been done for a while. And, so there were some guys, so we got better each year. I think our big step for us was, I think, my third year. It was 2015. That was Stevens Point's last championship. We beat them in the semifinal in the league. That was our first win on their court. They went on and then, swept through the tournament after that. But that legitimized us a little bit more, I think, and not only with our current players, but, with our staff, like, okay, like, we're on to something here. We just have to continue to develop and recruit well. And they kind of, we had a nice kind of escalation there, and kind of built up to, my final year there, we break through, and, we don't win the league.
Right.
We got knocked off, I think, in the semifinal of the tournament, which ended up being a blessing. Probably we got an extra day or two of rest in there. And then, you just got to get in the tournament and anything can happen. Right. And we were fortunate to, get some momentum and have some Ben Boots moments. And
incredible.
Fort Wayne.
Yeah. I mean, talk about some incredible moments along the way. You lose to Nebraska Wesleyan in the national championship game that season. And we talked about just a second ago about, like, betting on yourself and having to roll the dice and make long-term decisions in your industry. And this was the ultimate one here, is you're sitting there with a team that got you to, I guess at the time it was Salem, Virginia, right? That's where that game was. They're all coming back, and you get the opportunity at WashU. So WashU opens, and you've got to decide to pursue it. I mean, that most people would look at it, I think, being head coach at a IIAC school as, like, at a IIAC school that's been to the national championship game is like the top of Division III. Talk about the decision to pursue the WashU job, because it's very different. Being the head coach at Oshkosh is really different institutions. Just talk us through that decision?
Well, as you can imagine, it was a very difficult one to make. Because I loved Oshkosh, I love my guys. Those guys, I'm still, really close with them, and they're all getting married now, and so that's been fun to see that part of that transition. And but I think my connection to WashU, or at least it occurred early in my coaching career or head coaching career. I was at we came down and played Mark's team, Mark Edwards' team. It was their first national championship season. I think that was 2008. And came down, and I'd never been on this campus before. And I'm walking around the campus. We had an administrator at who had been previously at WashU. So he knew a lot of people. So he was kind of, he came with and was introducing, and I just stepped on the campus and I'm like, wow, like this is something different. And I just remember there was cranes all over. They were building buildings. And then, got to meet, I met Mark, and we developed a relationship beyond that. So I remember coming back from that trip and telling my wife, and this I think probably was 2008, I'm like, I hope someday to have a chance at a job like that.
Right.
This would be, and that was about the end of it. I just remember kind of having like, boy, you've got a lot of work to do in your career if you're ever going to be in the running. And, stayed in touch with Mark. I'd see Mark at the Final Fours, and and then obviously, this is how it played out. It was, you're right. Sometimes you can, like I wasn't looking to leave Oshkosh.
Right.
I don't know that there was another job. I'm pretty confident there was not another job in Division III I probably would have left for.
Because the cool thing about WashU is it's such an elite academic institution, but I don't know how to word this, but it's still much different than like, had you tried to go get the head job at Amherst or Williams or something, like that, though, that's a different world there in the NESCAC. I think the kind of kids you recruit at WashU are similar in a lot of ways to the kids that you would recruit to Oshkosh. You're a great Chicago recruiter, which is, boy, heavy base for WashU. Yeah. So you had to learn a whole new world of where to go find kids and how to do it. But would you agree? It seems like you're getting a lot of the same type of young men to your program. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. And I feel like when I'm around my current team or my teams here, I do see so many similarities to my previous teams. It just feels like, especially, like these are my kind of guys, right. I'm pretty open about what my kind of,
yeah.
And, our guys at, not my guys, our guys, at Oshkosh, they, and now really even going back to Lawrence. So Lawrence, Oshkosh, and now WashU, like if you put all those guys in the room together, they'd be more similar than different.
Sure.
And we'd all have a similar language. There'd be certain, like they all would know what a certain kind of cut is or a certain expression. And we do have, I think, a culture and a language. And a lot of that, I'm going to attribute that going back to John Tharp, because I really, he's a genius and has a way. And I got to witness and be part of that and say like, well, this is how you do it.
Right.
Not just even like schematically X and O wise, but just like all encompassing, how you treat people, how you make it something special, make the 18th kid on the bench feel like he's the most important player in your program. And had I not probably experienced that, witnessed that, lived that with John, I think that's just made a huge imprint on our approach, and
right.
So to answer your question, yeah, I think my guys at Oshkosh, our guys here at WashU, they're very similar.
Yeah, and I totally understand
they're all smarter than the head coach. So
you're right. I totally understand that it is a different world at WashU, and it's a national type of scene now, and the academic requirements are through the roof. I get that part, but yeah, when I look at your team, and looks a lot like your Oshkosh team did. It looks like a great CCIW team. It's that kind of kids. Just a couple more questions, and you've been really generous with your time. I want I want to ask you about just two more things, maybe three. Replacing a legend. I've seen it play out in person at Illinois Wesleyan. You know, when Denny Bridges left, there's good and bad about that whole scene. That can be really tough. Mark Edwards, 37 years, 685 wins, 10 UAAs, 2 national championships. You know, it's hard to come in after a guy like that. What's been the, obviously it's worked really well. What's been the key to that going so well?
Right. Because you're supposed to be the guy that follows the guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. Right. That's Ron Rose. Perfect example. He's the guy.
Yeah.
He's the guy after the guy.
Well, first of all, I had, and Mark's amazing. Mark Edwards is one of the most amazing people. I feel, you know, he's like a mentor to me. He was before I even took the job, you know, and I think that's really helped. And then he's just an incredible human being. And he is, so he's made this he made this transition so easy for me in the sense that, you know, like just, he's a really intelligent man. And he, you know, said, this is how I did it. Pat, you're probably going to do things differently, but I'm going to share the why I did it the way I did it. And I mean, I'm smart enough to know, like, he had won 37 straight or 30 straight winning seasons. I better listen to what his why, and if it ain't broke, don't fix a lot of that. And then he's just been so supportive and in a way that, I mean, it's hard when this, you know, he's the only modern coach of this program, you know, and then, you know, he's not a guy, he doesn't golf, he doesn't have other, you know, never, you know, he's a basketball coach, and he's a mentor, and he's a leader. And it's been great to be able to tap into him and just, you know, Mark, you know, what do you think about this? Or, you know, I just had him this week, you know, we just had our Lapata tournament, and he came in on Thursday and spoke to our guys about the history and the meaning, like the why Lapata was created. And, you know, he's the architect. It was his, you know, it's the precursor to the UAA. It's the reason why the UAA exists, is because this tournament got started and it was a wild success. And, you know, and so our guys are just glued. And the cool thing is just seeing how, you know, Mark was in his element. Like he was, you know, and so for us to have, you know, I credit Mark for, you know, making this such a great transition. And we are very aligned, even though, you know, maybe basketball X and O wise, we diverge somewhere. But man, on how we approach it, coaching and teaching and relationships and everything, we're very aligned. And so it's been awesome. He is an amazing man.
Yeah, he's a really, really good human being. And you know, when you're around Division III, you get to know people, and there's certain people you gravitate to because they gave you the time of day. And when I lived in Columbia, Missouri for a few years, I used to come over and just watch WashU games. I would drive an hour and a half over, and just ended up kind of talking to Coach Edwards a lot. My wife and I would come over, and he was just so genuine to both of us. We'd see him out at Cafe Napoli after the game, or, you know, in the bleachers, he'd come over and say hello. And I always remembered that, but like, he didn't have to do any of that. He was, you know, one of the most successful coaches in the history of Division III. And so it's no surprise that he's made it easy for you, because it could go the other way. You know, there's sometimes the guy that leaves, you know, it's kind of like, I'm the guy and good luck, you know, here's the keys, good luck, you know. And he clearly, it's his baby, and he wanted the program to flourish like it is. And so I had to ask you about Coach Edwards. Two more quick ones. So you've got Fontbonne, and then you've got Illinois Wesleyan. And, you know, a few years ago, I started thinking to myself, well, what's the best non-conference rivalry in Division III? And I wrote a bunch of them down, and I couldn't come up with any that were close to WashU versus Illinois Wesleyan in terms of a non-conference game that's played every year with as much on the line and as many times as the two teams end up meeting in the tournament. Your thoughts on that rivalry, your thoughts on the upcoming game that we're just a little while from here?
That's the beauty of, I think, a couple of things. There is rich history between these two programs. And I've had, speaking of Mark, like he told me the story about, when he came back to WashU and had to start 10 years without basketball, restart it. And that's when Denny was really, had things rolling. And eventually they played, and, like the mutual respect, like it started right there and probably, I don't know, 84, 85, somewhere in that mid 80 period. And then you just look through the season, how often, we've played in
it's incredible
regular season, and then so many postseasons. And I think Illinois Wesleyan has got the better of a lot of the postseason I can see. I think it starts with just a level of respect, like that consistency amongst both programs being how they, their success, sustained success over now many decades, and I love, and again, I'm a Midwestern guy, and the respect I have for, the programs in our region, I know them well. That's where I have been. And the fact that, we're just, if we don't play every year, it's, and I know Ron feels the same way. Like we just count on it. I call him and or he calls me, whoever. It's like, all right, let's, it takes us 10 minutes to figure it out. It's the easiest scheduling, or sometimes we're just doing it by text. Like, what do you got on December 17th? Well, we got finals. Can we do it on the 9th? And it's boom, done. It's no shenanigans or anything like that. It's just like, hey, we're going to play, and we're going to both be better because of playing the game.
In the game this year, Pat, I have to turn in a ballot for the top 25 probably before the end of the night here, and I'll have Illinois Wesleyan number 2 again. I had you somewhere in the 20s after the Webster game, but then I think I'm turning a ballot in with you at like 6 or 7 or 8 or something. What I'm watching right now looks like that game. I think the teams are more similar than they are dissimilar. Elite post players, depth, great guards, athletic teams, good rebounding teams. I know you haven't had a chance to pay any attention to Illinois Wesleyan yet and watch a bunch of film, but the game this year, that has a chance to be one of the D3 games of the year. That's going to be fantastic.
I'm not going to think about them till after Wednesday night.
But if you did,
yeah, I don't think it matters year by year. I know they're going to roll in this year, our place, with really talented players who understand how to play together and are going to be a handful. And I can say that about this year, next year, 5 years from now.
Yep.
It's going to be, because it's how it's been. And I hope that we can say the same about WashU. And it's just going to be like, I think I'm to the point now in my career that I think those a matchup like that just excites you. Like, it just does. I want to see how good we are, and let's test ourselves, and it comes at a great time, kind of right before for us, conference play begins in after January 1. So, boy, it's a great, and you come, I know you're a big proponent of tough scheduling and not conference, and a lot goes into that. But I will say, when you play teams that really test you and challenge you, that's where you grow the most.
Absolutely.
Growth comes from. And regardless of the outcome, we'll be a better team. And I would hope to say we can do, Ron's team will be a better team as a result of that game.
And playing a tough schedule. That's the reason why, a Pool C Oshkosh team ends up in the national championship game. And all these teams that have played great schedules, they get to the tournament and they're ready to go. So yeah, it's a great non-conference rivalry. It's been a great one forever and ever. I could see all the players in my head, the Chris Jeffries and Sean Wallace's and Tyler Nadings and Jack Nolan's. It's been amazing. The last thing I just didn't want to finish without asking you about your conference, because it's one of the best. If you start ranking the D3 conferences, you put the IIAC up there and you say it deserves to be called number 1. And then after that, it gets real close. CCIW, the UAA, that's probably top 3 right there. All 8 schools right now in the UAA are in the top 100 of Massey. 5 of them are in the top 50. Rochester might be 51, but let's call them 50. Ridiculously good league, and a very different. This is one of the big differences from, you're getting on buses in Wisconsin going from place to place. UAA, talk about that. Fans, I think, would be fascinated to hear how unique that conference is.
It is. And I think I'm fortunate that I did the Midwestern bus tour for a long time, and, had to find out every subway in the small town for a pregame meal, and then have this experience. And so it is really unique. I mean, 2 years ago, and this was mid-February of 2020. So think of what happened a couple of weeks later. We wake up on a Sunday morning, we're staying in a hotel that overlooked or looked into the World Trade Center. On a Sunday morning, we had a noon game against NYU. I'd never been to the memorial. We're all walking around and I'm like, oh my, I'm pinching myself. Like, this is like, life is a collection of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pretty rich experience. So I think I'm very thankful and appreciative. And I know our players are too. Like, we talk all the time, like, this is really special what you guys get to do. And as a result, our approach, how we honor this is, and they do a great job of not, having an entitled approach at all. But you're right. It's to fly and play in, New York, Boston, Atlanta.
Pretty cool.
Cleveland, it's really, it's unique. And my assistant was an assistant at Stetson. And he tells our guys all the time, like, listen, half of Division I doesn't get to do what we do.
No.
So, stay in these cities and experience it. And so, and it's not lost on me at all, how unique and how fun that is. And it really is fun. It can be tiring, but man, it's a lot of fun. Our league is, I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea. And I'm embarrassed to say it. I didn't understand the UAA as a non-UAA coach at all.
Right.
I'd played against Mike at Chicago. My last year we played against Zimmerman, Emery's team, and realized how good they are. And I certainly knew WashU, but it's really, because we have, that we're spread out. So we don't cross each other a ton.
Yeah.
Chicago, WashU does, obviously, but
Yep.
So we're all kind of, a little bit different, have our own, niches. And then the style of play is so broad. That's really been one of the funnest parts is to coach against these unique, in Wisconsin, we're all kind of heterogeneous. We're all kind of,
everyone's got a 6'8" beast down low, and everyone kind of looks the same. Sure.
And this is now, it's really broad. That's been really fun, because I feel like I've grown a ton, and the coaches are fantastic across the board. To your point about our league this year, it's going to be wild. I think it's going to be as good as ever. There's been some, I think, impact grad transfers have come
big time. Yeah.
This returning, fifth, grad seniors. It's going to be, I'm going to probably, my hair is getting more and more gray. It's going to be white by the time we get to end of February, but, looking forward to that. And we do, here's the other thing I'll share that we did as a league, or as head coaches, really throughout most of the pandemic, is we had like a weekly call, a weekly standing Zoom. And it started out, trying to figure out if we're going to try to play last year. And
right.
As that sort of dissolved pretty quickly, it became just like a weekly therapy session.
That's cool.
Amongst the head coaches. And just, it really, it connected. We're trying to beat each other's brains out on the floor, but we also are aware of this rich conference, and, we're the protectors of it,
right.
And of these traditions. And one of the cool things we did is we had one of the weeks we invited on Mark Edwards, Joe Nesci, and
that's cool.
Near Rochester, Pat Cunningham, who was at Chicago, and then Tony Wingen, who's at Carnegie Mellon, who's been in the league most, and all of us current coaches, and we just kind of all sat back and watched those, listened to just tell stories.
That's
And
really cool.
it was, I don't know if we recorded it. We should have recorded it. It was one of the coolest. And those guys, I mean, if we hadn't shut them off, one of them had to go to an appointment. Otherwise they would have gone on hours and hours and hours. I mean, it was.
I would like to have the footage for the QCast. I wish someone would have leaked that to me. I would have liked to have run with that. In this year, Pat, you know, you look at the league, I think coming in, everyone looked at Emory as the favorite, Brandeis, and then WashU somewhere in there. I think everything's kind of been just blown up a little bit, and that there's 5 teams that have jumped out as really good. You know, WashU, Emory, Brandeis, Rochester, Case. And then, oh, by the way, you know, Chicago, Carnegie, NYU are going to be really good too. I don't know. I'm not going to put you on the spot. This is a statement. From what I've seen in the last, you know, year winning streak here, I would say WashU is a little bit of a favorite over Emory, over Brandeis. And so I'm really fascinated. And my sleeper is Case Western Reserve. I've watched them 3 times. They're really good. So you're right. Like, and then, you know, funny things happen in your league, you know, like you'll be a Final Four WashU team and you'll go up to Chicago and that game's going to be tied with a minute to play, you know, and it's just that it's an amazing league. Or those Sunday games, right? Those Sunday games where I'm watching a stream and there's like daylight pouring in and it's just like this empty gym and just like a grind. Like it's a pretty quirky league, isn't it?
It is. It is. Well, I'll tell you another thing. I don't know if people know this. So we have, after our Sunday, so we've been playing the early game on Sunday, the noon game on Sunday.
Right.
There's a tradition in the UAA started year 1. The women do this on Friday night. The men do this on Sunday. We eat a meal. We have a social with our opponent after we play them. And that's, when I heard that, I'm like, whoa, that's different.
That's super different. I don't know if Illinois Wesleyan and Augustana have ever tried to do that, but if they did, I just don't think it would work well.
And it speaks to, you know, again, I think to the essence of what this league's about. Like, and I always joke that the post-game meal takes a hell of a lot better after you win than after a loss.
Right.
But the idea is, and the coaches have to be the ones that really support this, is our players intermingle, they sit together. It's not just like, you know, Rochester on this part of the room and WashU here. They're mixed at the tables, and we'll bring our families and we'll introduce our spouses or kids. And it's pretty cool. I will say that it's a pretty unique, an awesome thing. And so often our players, like 2 years ago, one of our former WashU guys, he, you know, just graduated, he's in New York. He was living with an Emory player, you know.
There's a lot of that happens. I always end up seeing like tweets from UAA guys that played against each other. Now they're hanging out in Manhattan or something, right? Or downtown Chicago. There's a ton of that happens in your league.
Yeah. And so, and that really, again, when I read through like the kind of the mission, the ethos of the league, it speaks to exactly like having committed to this incredible competition, but with a bigger picture in mind. And so I don't know if 30-year-old Pat would have had been able to really grasp that concept, 35-year-old, but this stage I can, and I really appreciate it. For sure.
I appreciate you talking about the league. It's such an interesting league. I want to make sure people understand it, and hearing coaches like you talk about it really helps. Well, you've been this is the longest QCast ever, and time flies when you're having fun. I think this is just the nature of, I should have found a way to catch you much earlier than this. So next time we do this, it can be hey, let's talk about the game or that game. I want to leave it with you though. Pat, you know, great job with what you've done just in your career at every stop. Your team is fantastic this year. What would you like to leave with the people tuning into the QCast here today?
Well, I saw this on Twitter recently. I don't know if it came from you or who it came from, but someone said recently that the only good things on Twitter right now are basically from the D3 hoops community.
That someone did say last week.
And I'm like, that is so on point. It really is. And I mean, so kudos to you and to the you know,
It's a
David
large group. Yeah.
and there's the growing and, you know, it's just, I mean, with so much tough stuff going on in our world, our country,
Right.
you know, and again, we're the diehards of the purity and what we believe in. But I'm telling you, I think it is, you know, and maybe through what things you're doing, it's continuing to grow. Like this is getting bigger.
It is.
Becoming more aware. And we all know how good the ball is, like the quality of basketball. And you go to an Illinois Wesleyan game, you go to a WashU game, you go to an Oshkosh game, those people are coming back. They're going to come back again because they're, you know, it's just, it hits you in the face. Like this is all the right things. And so I so much appreciation for all that the D3 Hoops community, broad community is doing, and don't stop, like just continue because it makes it more fun. It's great to have these debates. I love your Yeshiva Illinois Wesleyan.
It's going to be,
I mean, like we take everything way too seriously anyway. Like, let's have some fun, you know, like let's have fun. And so I think it's great. It's
I appreciate that. And I know all the folks that are part of that community appreciate it because it is growing. And the Yeshiva is the best example to have that group, these passionate fans that are now in the mix now. And we're having debates about, you know, their schedule and this schedule. And it's a really, really fun dynamic that's going on. I look forward to seeing you. I bought a down and back, I guess it's up and back plane ticket to St. Louis on December 19th. So, you know, as long as Southwest does me a solid, I get there. I feel like I got a private jet or something. I land at like, you know, an hour before the game. My flight home's like an hour after the game. So, you know, just fingers crossed. I look forward to seeing a wonderful Division III game on the 19th. And again, you've been so generous with your time here. We've gone an hour and a half, and I just can't thank you enough.
Well, hey, you can pick out which seat you want in the building right now. If you want to, you know, point to it, I can reserve it for you.
I like to roam around. I like to roam around and see all the people there and have some conversations. Folks, that is season 2, episode 8 of the QCast. Pat Juckem, the head men's basketball coach of Washington University in St. Louis. Pat, good luck to you and the Bears this year. I'll see you in person very soon, and really appreciate your time here today.
Sounds good. Appreciate the opportunity. It's been awesome to just talk about D3 basketball, our history, and all those things. And look forward to seeing you in the old field house here in a couple of weeks.
Will do. Thanks, Pat.